information on this theater. It's just an extremely opulent looking building that's, I guess, kind of like a more regular Gaudi. But, I mean, Gaudi's Spanish.
Say that, yeah. I was thinking, his looks like Gaudi.
It has that sort of living architecture feel to it.
I call it drippy.
It's drippy. It's more lacy, I guess, than drippy. Like, the arch over the marquee is especially beautiful, I think. There's a bit of Moorishness to it, but I like this Churrigueresque movement, and I don't know how many other designs at the time, like where else this would have turned up. To be honest, that was the first time I'd ever heard of that.
It is very specific.
It's very specific, and I know that like the Tampa Theater, the Florida Theater, those are just two that I've been to that are very kind of Mediterranean or Spanish revival. So the Florida Theater is downtown Jacksonville, and that one is really cool because the waiting lobby is like a courtyard. So the ceiling is blue with stars, and there's fake plants, and there's a second floor with these arches. I think it's all cast, like it's not real stone.
Wow.
But it has a really neat feel to it. So this is the architect again, Albert C. Martin. He had a long list of theaters that he designed, including the Wonderland or Jade Theater in 1908, the Liberty in 1910. These are both on Main Street. Other theaters were the Adams, 1914, the Town Theater, 1920, the Boulevard, 1925. Martin was part of the team that designed City Hall in 1928, also the Department of Water and Power Building in 1965. That's not right because he died in 1960, so perhaps he did the design and it was executed posthumously. I almost said postmortem, and I knew that was not correct.
Yeah, the post part, right?
I did. So the company apparently is still in business as both architects and contractors, with descendants of Martin running it. William Lee Willett, the interior theater designer architect, designed a lot of the interior around the 1841 English fairy tale titled King of the Golden River by John Ruskin.
Who will definitely show up in the future because dude was crazy. Well, he wasn't crazy, but he had some serious scandal.
Do you say Ruskin or Ruskin?
Ruskin.
Ruskin, okay. Yeah. The organ grills in particular showcase images lifted from the book King of the Golden River, including Evil Brothers, a golden tankard, southwest wind, and even a dog. Hanging from the coffered dome ceiling is a chandelier that once hung in the lobby of the Willett Design Metropolitan, which is now demolished, at 6th and Hill Street. Well, it had a pipe organ in 1918. It was a 2-manual 7-rank Wurlitzer, which ended up being moved to the Rialto, which I'll discuss in just a minute. It's another theater downtown LA. The replacement was a 2-manual 16-rank Wurlitzer, but those are no longer in the building. There's not an organ anymore. The first show at the $1 Million Theater was The Silent Man, which also happened to be a silent film.
How apropos. Except for the organ. I don't know how much you know about early movie history, but that's basically what they were. They were, these films, and they would have film cards that, had their dialogue, but the track to the movie was...
That's funny.
An organ playing, so it wasn't like dead silent,
right?
It was just they weren't actually taught you. They had no way to record voices.
So for the 100th anniversary of film, which may have been in 1989, all I know is that the Film Institute, the American Film Institute, based in LA, did this nationwide tour of famous films, and they came to Minneapolis, which is where I grew up. So I was in Minnesota at the time, and the Film Institute had one of their opening, I think the opening night, like in honor of this touring film festival, was a Charlie Chaplin movie, City Lights.
Right.
And this specific theater that it was in St. Paul which I think it was the Fitzgerald, has an organ. So somebody played the organ the way it's, so we saw the movie as it was supposed to be.
That kicks ass.
Viewed in the teens or whatever, whenever City Lights came out. And so someone played the organ behind the film, and it was awesome.
That is super cool.
Yeah, and there was an opener for City Lights, and it was Gertie the Dinosaur. It was some super early animated film where they also played the organ behind this film, and it was
okay.
It was a pretty wonderful night. I think I was 12 or 13. No, I don't know. I think I was in 6th grade. Anyway, it was great. So that year doesn't work out then. But anyway,
you're dating yourself.
Again, math doesn't matter. But yeah, but it was cool to see a film as it was intended to be seen, with the organ and, no dialogue. And City Lights is also a very sweet film. So it was really fun. I can't tell you the plot of The Silent Man. I read through it, and it was just kind of silly. So, but it wasn't exciting, and it's not really important to rehash what the plot was. But its opening, however, February 1st, 1918, the opening at the $1 Million Theater, drew some big stars of the day, including Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks. Scholars of early American films are probably familiar with those and other names of attendees that I did not recognize. Directors who came included Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith, two names with whom I am definitely familiar. But Grumman was able to get quite a crowd, as this was a really, really grand theater and a pretty big deal. Fast forward to the 40s, and the theater was hosting jazz and big band stars like Billie Holiday, Artie Shaw, and Lionel Hampton. In the 50s, the $1 Million became the first theater on Broadway to feature Spanish-language variety shows. It actually served as a leading Latin entertainment venue for several decades. Unfortunately, the lobby has been altered. The ceiling was lowered and the walls were covered. As much as you hate to see a dropped ceiling, if you're in a historic building and see it, it typically means that whatever was behind it has been preserved, because you don't remove whatever is on a ceiling or a wall to put something in. You just kind of, if you need mechanicals or whatnot, you need a plenum, you need space, and you're not going to take the time to remove what's there to put on a ceiling that's just dropped down in front of it. So luckily, the original ceiling and murals are intact behind the drop ceiling and new walls. Willette, the movie palace interior architect, I guess. He died in 1955. So besides the $1 Million Theater, he designed the Metropolitan and Rialto theaters in downtown LA, and a remodel in the 20s of the Strand in Long Beach. The $1 Million was closed to the public. It reopened for performances and special events in 2008 after a year-long refurbishment, and it now serves as an event and filming location. Actually, I read an article from last November saying that it was announced that an online fashion startup called Coburd, I've never heard of this, would lease the theater and office space for a total of 56,000 square feet. And it's not just the theater that's experiencing a renaissance. I guess this part of Los Angeles downtown and stretch of Broadway they're kind of trying to revitalize it, trying to bring people back downtown. So after a decade-long stint from 2008 to now, 2018, I'm sure that the theater will be glad to see some action again.
Provided that it's the right action.
As well.
I'm a little concerned. Just as someone who's involved in preservation rehab and adaptive reuse.
Right. They said that they were planning on preserving. I don't think they're doing anything to the theater. And then there were some street retail spaces.
Yeah, because it's got the Grand Central Market is attached to it.
It's next door, yeah.
Yeah, so it all went together. So they're saying offices and then retail space, I'm assuming, in that building. But we'll definitely keep an eye on it. So if we jump back to the early years of the theater and the adjacent office building, Sid Grauman, okay. Sid Grauman was good friends with a very popular silent film comedian by the name of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. I think pretty much anybody with any acquaintance with the history of movies would recognized the name Fatty Arbuckle. But he ended up in a pretty bad situation in 1921 when he was accused of the rape and murder of a young woman named Virginia Rapp.
Oh my gosh.
And so we are going to...
Wait, when is this?
1921.
Okay.
And it was in the office of Sid Grauman that Fatty Arbuckle called the police to basically surrender himself.
Oh, man.
So that is how the two are tied in. But before we get to that point, let's talk a little bit about his early life. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was born on March 24th, 1887 in Smith Center, Kansas.
Is that a real town?
Apparently it is. His mother was Mary Gordon, who went by the name Molly, and William Goodrich Arbuckle was his father. Roscoe was 13 pounds when he was born. And since both...
No.
Yes. That makes my nether regions
Are we
hurt.
sure?
That's what it
Is that
said.
possible?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of a kid more
Being
than
that?
10 or 11.
Yeah.
That's really frightening.
I know, right? It doesn't really do anything to recommend childbirth, that's for sure. But so he was 13 pounds when he was born, and since both of his parents had a slim build, his father was convinced that Roscoe was not his kid.
Yeah.
So apparently it was his idea to name the baby Roscoe Conkling Arbuckle, which was the name of a well-known philandering politician from New York who he despised. Sounds like a
Wait,
really...
so he decided to name his own kid
After a philandering politician, yes.
That's just cruel.
I know, right? So
how do you get past that?
I know, right? I mean, just, So
That's funny.
His mother, Molly, on the other hand, suffered from the difficult birth and would have lifelong health problems as a result. He was also...
Wait, he was the only... Sorry, what number?
I was going to say he was one of 9 children.
No.
Yeah, so I would imagine that she was just plain worn out. I didn't know.
What number? Please tell me he was the last one.
I did not get that. I should have looked up census records since I love census records, but I did not. So when Roscoe was 2, the family moved to Santa Ana, California. He continued to be rather large for his age, but he was incredibly agile and he had a wonderful singing voice. So his mother encouraged him to become a performer. He was 8 years old when he debuted with a traveling acting troupe, which actually featured some very well-known stage actors of the time period. He continued to act off and on for the next 4 years, but in 1899, his mother Molly died. His father, still believing that he was illegitimate, basically just turned him out of the house and refused to support him. Yeah, he's not a good guy. So Roscoe basically...
Well, he didn't have proof, right?
I know, he didn't. So Roscoe had to fend for himself, basically. He was only 12 years old. He was forced to take odd jobs at the local hotel. And he had a habit of singing while he worked, and so he was actually overheard by a professional singer who was staying at the hotel, and he encouraged Roscoe to enter a amateur talent show that was going to go off. So he got on stage, he did some comedic acting, some dancing, and some singing, but it didn't impress the audience very much. So if you've ever seen movies...
It takes a lot to impress people all those days.
That's true, right?
No.
Are you not entertained?
Have you seen stuff that they did back then?
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So, if you've ever seen movies or even cartoons when someone's on stage and they're getting booed
and they get the hook.
Yeah, the hook comes out.
Yeah, and not the gong. That was later.
Yeah, the hook actually
the hook
was coming out.
That was was that a real thing?
It was, yeah. It was coming out for him. He saw it, and so he dodged it by somersaulting off the stage and into the orchestra
and the audience was like, that was awesome.
Exactly. It was like, that's so great. So he won the competition.
No.
And
physical comedy, folks. That's where it's at.
And so he used the fanfare to leverage himself into a vaudeville career.
Oh my gosh.
For those of you who are not familiar, vaudeville was extremely popular at this time, and it was where a lot of early movie stars got their start. They were basically variety shows.
Yeah.
So you get some singing, some dancing, some comedy, a little bit of everything. By 1903, Arbuckle had made enough of a name for himself that the theater impresario, Sidney Grauman, asked him to come sing at his unique theater in San Francisco. So he soon moved on to the Pantages Theater group, which was touring up and down the West Coast. By 1906, he had become the main attraction in another vaudeville group, and he was only 19 at the time. 2 years later, he married Minta Durfee. Her full name actually was Araminta Durfee. I can't decide if that's totally badass. Is
that better or worse?
Or just sad.
How do you spell that?
A-R-A-M.
Oh, I thought it was E-I-N-T-A. Araminta. Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe it's
Where does that even
maybe Araminta
come from?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is she foreign?